French artist Henri Matisse developed later in life, including arthritis that affected his hands and made painting increasingly difficult. But Matisse didn't simply stop creating. When physical limitations made traditional painting difficult, he began working in a different way. He created large paper cutouts using scissors to cut shapes from brightly colored paper. Eventually, he worked from his bed or his wheelchair, with the assistant helping him arrange pieces in position. One of his famous late works, The Snail, came from this period. The interesting part of the story isn't that he had arthritis, it's that he changed the way he worked instead of deciding he couldn't work anymore. Sometimes dealing with arthritis isn't about giving up what you love, it's about finding a new way to do it. And just to show you, this was called The Snail. And it's actually on exhibit up in London. And this is Henri Matisse. Hello, this is Don.
And this is Gina.
And today we're
with Focused Healthy Family.
And this is podcast number 240. And today we're talking about arthritis, not just another joint.
But first, there's always a few jokes. So, it's pretty strange. Doctors are now prescribing cannabis for arthritis sufferers. I mean, the definition of arthritis is inflammation of the joints. My dad, who has arthritis, was arrested for falling down while on a jog. Apparently, you can't roll joints in public spaces yet. And I noticed my vacuum is cleaning less of the house than it did before. I think it has rheumatoid arthritis. Cha-ching.
Cha-ching, cha-ching.
So, today, I thought we'd talk about arthritis.
Well, I'd like to maybe first explain, like, you're an occupational therapist. How do you work with arthritis? What is it that in your tool of expertise with that?
Well, that's the second part of the.
Oh, the second part. Okay.
First, we have to know what arthritis is.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
So, Don, what do you think arthritis is?
It's probably inflammation of the joints, causing a lot of pain and suffering.
And why do those joints get inflamed?
That's a good question. I would say my thought would be that it's a lot of the foods we eat, but it's probably more than that, I would imagine.
And is all arthritis the same?
No, there's a couple different kinds. I don't know if I know the names of them, but I know, like, my oldest brother had rheumatoid arthritis. But you tell me the others.
So, what on earth is arthritis? I need better lighting, Don.
Oh.
So, arthritis is not a single disease, right? It's a disease that it refers to joint pain, joint disease. But there are many different conditions, and people of all ages, races, and sexes live with arthritis. It's the leading cause of disability in the United States. It's most common among women, although it's not a disease of aging. Some types of arthritis occur more often in older people. So you can have different symptoms with arthritis. Don, I think you mentioned swelling.
Yes.
Pain, the stiffness, diminished range of motion. You know what that means?
Just you don't have as much flexibility in what you do or how you.
And symptoms can be mild or, up to severe, and it can lead to chronic pain, which can cause all kinds of difficulty. Things like going up and down the stairs, which is why we tried to buy a one-level home. And you can have arthritis in different joints of the body, including the heart, the eyes, the lungs, the kidneys, and the skin. All righty, and I'm taking some information we'll have to share this article. This is from arthritis.org.
What a perfect place for it.
So causes of arthritis. Post-traumatic injuries. So if you've had a fall, you've had damage to a joint. I was in a car accident 12 plus years ago. I didn't break any bones, but that knee has bothered me increasingly over the years. I'm almost certain there's arthritis kind of set in there. You can have arthritis from work-related damage, heavy duty work like farming, construction, um, but also repetitive movements. So different lifestyle factors can play a part in arthritis. Excessive weight, lack of exercise, a poor diet. Um, so,
Well, one thing I want to kind of add in here and thinking
mhm,
about, I've dealt with cardiologists, and one of the things that they wanted to put me on was statins. And everything I've read about statins is that they cause joint pain.
I
So
thought it caused muscle cramps, but
no, well, yeah, but it's also joint
joint
pains.
pain.
I read, and I'm just wondering if that could be one of the causes of it too.
I don't know. I have to see if somebody's researched that at
Yeah,
all.
if you've researched that and you want to come on and tell us about it, I would love to hear. We'd love to hear about it.
Um, so there's collagen um, that's in between our joints that help them glide and move smoothly. And so that can wear out over time.
Coach.
And that's what you think of when you think of osteoarthritis typically. But there can also be autoimmune arthritis. So that's when you're talking about rheumatoid arthritis. So it's a totally different cause. It's an autoimmune disease. You've heard of other autoimmune
And
diseases.
that's what rheumatoid is? Is that what you
Yes,
said?
it's an
Okay.
autoimmune disease. So, a healthy immune system is protective, but inflammatory arthritis, the immune system is overactive and it's attacking healthy tissue, including joints of the spine, the hands, the feet. Um, and it can even become systemic, where it's damaging the eyes, the heart, and other organs. Um, so the immune system is impaired with that, and there's a whole lot um, of information about autoimmune diseases. We can share some links to that. There's other types of autoimmune arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, um, axial spondyloarthritis,
We need to practice that one.
juvenile arthritis. So there's actually a form of arthritis that um, affects children. Um, excuse me with my papers here. So, what can you do about it? What can you do if you have arthritis?
Use some of those tips.
No, I'm asking you, Don. What are you going to do with? Do you have
Um,
arthritis anywhere, Don?
I don't think so.
Sorry
I don't have.
about all my
I don't
paper
know.
shuffling. You don't think
Um,
so? You ever wake up with stiffness?
Not really. Not. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Most of the time, I'm usually sleeping on the hand that has stiffness. But
So you can have arthritis in places like your back.
oh well, that could be.
Um,
I mean, one of the things I read in those tips is that you take things a lot slower and slow yourself down because you can't move your deck, not having the dexterity to be able to hold things as you used to. You want to take it a little differently, hold it a little differently, and slow down with what you're doing.
um, that's helpful. So from the occupational therapy toolkit, I always tell people first thing in the morning, people are generally stiff. And so starting with stretches, putting your hands together, reaching up overhead. This is really good to do when you're laying down because if you have any issues with your shoulders, it's going to be a whole lot easier because gravity is going to help bring those arms up and then bringing your arms out away from your body.
Can't go very
Um,
far. Got a wall.
and
Number
your
one.
hands. And I've got a tip for you on some hand exercises that can be helpful. So, occupational therapy can help people with arthritis in a lot of different ways. Um, So, in addition to exercise, there's different types of exercise that can be done. I say this phrase at least once a day when I'm working. So, arthritis affects the joints. The joints are not gliding smoothly. We can't change that per se. I mean, unless you have an operation, but we can support the muscles. The stronger the muscles are around your joint, the easier it is going to be to work. And that's where strength training is so important. After the age of 40, sometimes I've heard younger, we start losing muscle mass, and strength training is so important. Um, so, not, you think of exercise, you think of the treadmill, you think of, the new step, cardio exercise, which is good for your heart and lungs, but that's not strength training. So, strength training is lifting weights, doing resistive exercises. Um, you know, there's a lot of different types of strength training to help build muscles. There's ways you can strength train without straining on the joints. Um,
Is
and
that kind of like the like sitting exercises? Is that one way of?
well, it depends where your arthritis is.
Yeah.
A really great exercise for arthritis is water exercise. So in the water, your body is supported in space, and so there's less tension
Oh,
on the joints. And so any kind of water exercise, from walking in the water to water aerobics, it's a great way to exercise for a lot of different conditions, but particularly it can be helpful for arthritis. Occupational therapy also addresses other areas, and for one, joint protection and energy conservation techniques. And Don, you kind of touched on this with the ideas that you had, but how we move our joints affects their function. And do you know what ergonomics is? If I say ergonomics,
um, no. I mean, I think I've heard of it, but I don't want to guess on it.
so if I have my chair up really high, whoops, it won't go up
That
high.
one doesn't go up very high. It
No,
goes
you
right
can't.
back down.
And I'm in this position typing. Can't really
Oh, yeah.
see me. Where my arms are dangling down, my shoulders are hiked up in the air. That's not a good anatomical position for our body to be in. Little pads have become popular that you put in front of your keyboard to rest your wrists on, to reduce strain on the joints. How you're sitting. If you wonder why I'm always lowering my chair, but when you sit in a chair, your ankle, your knee, and your hip joints should be at 90 degrees. So think of a corner of a piece of paper. Most you might sit in a chair and your legs are dangling, or if your hip and your knee get your level out are not level, that's putting extra strain on joints. I'm always looking at this with people. I bought a special chair for the kitchen for me. It sits a tiny bit lower, and this is a big reason why I like it so much. Um, it's why I adjust. We have an electric seat in the car, and it's why I adjust the angle of it. So I actually adjust it so my knees are a little higher than my hips, putting less strain on my back. I tell people this if they're in a hospital bed, you raise your legs up before you raise your head of your bed. It takes the pressure off the low back. Um, so finding ways to put less stress on the joint, whether you're working, sleeping, um, walking. You mentioned carrying things. If you use a walker, they make rollator walkers or a basket for a walker to put things in so you don't have to carry them, saving your energy. This is really important, especially when we talk about autoimmune diseases. How can we conserve our energy? How can we do something and it requires less difficulty, less resistance? So I'm going to put some clothes away. Am I going to take one piece of clothing out of the dryer, walk all the way to the bedroom and hang it up and put it away?
Oh, that would be great.
If you want to increase your activity and your exercise, go for it. If you want to conserve your energy, taking things out, having a low stool. So when you're reaching in the dryer, take things out using a reacher. So some people call it a grabber, but look online for reacher. I think there was a movie called Reacher, but to pick things up, it's giving you an extended arm um, to make it less difficult to have to lean forward and reach in. I think that's why front load washers came to be, possibly less difficulty than bending forward and leaning into a top loading. And,
Never thought
if
of
you're having these issues, it can be very different for different people. And you can work with an occupational therapist to address these areas.
it. Who would that be?
Maybe you already know your exercises, but maybe an occupational therapist, all you need is a doctor's order. Um,
You'll
and
come calling.
finding a clinic, most insurances will pay for occupational therapy to some degree. I work at an independent living community, and we actually operate within the building. It's a separate service. We have to go through your insurance, but people can receive occupational therapy just because their shoulder is bothering them, their hand is bothering them. Other things that can be helpful, assistive technology and devices to make it easier. If you've got rheumatoid arthritis and your hands are stiff and limited with your joints, there's different types of utensils that you can get to be easier to hold on to. There's angled utensils, built up handle utensils, all kinds of stuff that can make things easier. Um, a lot of different options out there, both technological, electronic, and basic. Uh, like I talked about, the utensils can be helpful.
So how many, what's, I guess, the percentage of people that are dealing with arthritis with your work? I mean, can you?
Every once in a while, the population I work with is generally 60, 65 and over. Um, I've been an occupational therapist for over 30 years, and with working with the geriatric population, every so often someone says, I don't have any arthritis.
Okay.
It's pretty rare that I hear that. It's not inevitable, um, but if you've engaged in sports, you've put extra stress on your joints. Being overweight puts extra stress on your joints. Um, some people are more prone to it, be it genetically, the diet and things that you eat that can be inflammatory in your system that can play a part in it. Um, and so I don't have prevalency numbers in
Mhm.
front of me.
But it sounds like
I'm sure
pretty strong
it
amount.
increases the higher up you get. Well, and I see a lot of people who've maybe broken a bone. And
Uh,
even though they broke this bone 10 years ago, now their elbow is hurting them even more. Well, obviously there's been some arthritis that's set into that area that's aggravating it even more now than it was in the past. Somebody who's even had a stroke affecting one side of their body, and arthritis is going to contribute to the movement and ability where you can have decline over time, unfortunately. Um, so exercise activity planning, I've kind of mentioned. Pain management techniques. So what can you do to reduce the pain? Cold is really good for any kind of inflammation, but you can do a mixture of hot and cold therapy. Relaxation techniques, breathing techniques. I do this when I'm doing exercises with someone who's anticipating the pain, right? If someone's going to come in and be like, we need to work those arms and they're sore, and you're like, it's going to hurt. Well, yeah, it's going to hurt. But going through breathing exercises to take you out of that tense state, which will kind of help relax your body.
well, even EFT can help to ease some of that. I mean, one of the things I always talk about is taking the emotions out of pain. That can help ease some of the pain. I get up in the morning. One of the first thing I try to do is kind of dig into myself as to what's hurting on me, and I close my eyes, like you say, and do the deep breathing, and then I imagine in my head where that pain is at, and I imagine that breath going to that pain, even though I know it goes to my lungs. It's something about how I put it in my mind, I think maybe sends a little extra blood to it, a little extra oxygen, whatever, and it tends to ease it somewhat.
Sure. There's very effective tools and techniques, and they don't cost you anything. And there's no side effects. Other things you can do, home and work environment modifications. I talked a little bit about that with adjusting the height of things, ergonomics, having grab bars and rails. When people are in need of putting a grab bar, maybe to help get in their shower or up from the toilet, I always like to look at the person first, because if you're 6'5", you're going to need a grab bar in a different place than if you're 5 feet tall. And we've had some residents who have an angled grab bar. Well, they say it feels like their hand is sliding down getting up from the toilet. So the angle, the position of it, the height of it. And Don, is a towel bar something good to grab a hold to when you're standing up from the toilet?
No, especially most people don't secure them even as much as I try to do, but even that doesn't
It's
it won't
not
hold the weight.
it's not secured into the wall in a way to support weight.
Yeah,
Shower heads, I've seen people grab a hold of shower heads and them
another good, not good.
disconnect. So it needs to be mounted, in the wood, studs in the wall. It needs to be mounted properly and securely, so that it can support your weight. And people who are over 250 pounds, you have extra considerations to consider. Now, if you're using it to help get up from the toilet, you're probably not putting all of your weight onto the bar, but thinking about those things, and it can be really helpful. Have an occupational therapist to look at the environment with you. If your loved one is in the hospital or rehab center, you can take a picture. You can do a video. Live video is great because then you have the person standing in the room, and they can stand and simulate things. Um,
When you did that recently with somebody and took them through their house and showed them different ways to be able to handle things.
I did. Yes, we had literally walked with, it was her father going through the home, and made some recommendations and some different things they hadn't even thought about. They had lots of questions for me, but right away I was jumping in with different ideas of things to think about. Um, I've met people who've put handrails all through their house, down the hallway, like everywhere. Um, a common thing, if someone feels unbalanced, we call it furniture walking, where you walk along and you grab onto things as you go. Depends on what you're grabbing on. Is it a lightweight table that can tip over?
Yeah.
Is it a chair on wheels? A door handle that's moving? Um, that's where things like walkers and canes and things come in handy to give extra support, because if you have impaired balance and then you've got some arthritis in your joints, all these different things contribute to the F word. A lot of times people hate when I ask that question, and my assessment includes fall risk. And have you fallen in the past year? How many times? Were you injured? Do you worry about falling? Do you feel unsteady when you're standing and walking? And so I'll refer to it as the F word because people don't like to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. And yet it's my job to think about, okay, what can contribute to a fall? What can we change? What can we improve? How can we modify things that can reduce that ability? Um, so yeah, there's a lot of different areas that occupational therapy can help you. Um, when it comes to arthritis and beyond just exercise. There's also different modalities that can be used to help reduce pain. Some people are familiar with a TENS unit. It sends electrical stimulation.
Mm.
There's
Alpha stim.
That's a different type of stimulation than electric stim, affecting different areas of the brain and the body. Um, a therapeutic ultrasound. It's not to see an image of your arm. It's sending deep heat into the tissue.
What about, I just thought about clothing. Um, because that just thinking about getting ourselves dressed, you have buttons to button and
Men's shirts, tiny little buttons.
yes.
So they make Velcro clothing now. That's easier. It's not just
Mm.
for exotic dancers. It can be easier.
Strip joint.
Snaps, when people are in rehab, loose fitting clothing, pullover shirts, depending on their injury. If they've injured a shoulder, a button down is going to be helpful. Um, Pants that don't have zippers and ties that just easily pull up and down are easier to deal with.
What
Um,
what about in shoes and socks?
so they make these awesome shoes now. I feel like all shoes should be this way, where the heel does not fold down. Um, so when you can slide your foot in, and years ago, as occupational therapists, we'd learn one-handed shoe tying techniques for someone who didn't have the ability to use one side of their body, one arm. But then they came out with elastic laces, and putting elastic laces in your shoes that allows your foot to stretch to slide your foot in. Now they make shoes with these things already in place. So they're already pre-laced, it stretches to be able to just put your foot and slide it straight down. Because for a lot of people, bending down can be hard, whether it's, back pain, arthritis in the back, or just the finger dexterity to do so. So Kizik's is a brand, but I know Skechers has lots of shoes, and I just laugh at it because I'm like, none of our shoes should collapse when we push on the heel, but they do, don't they?
Yeah.
And some people who have trouble, they might wear sandals or slip-on shoes or flip-flops, and that's now a tripping hazard. If it's not secure and staying on your feet, it's not supportive. Think of a lady's just dress flat, it's slippery on the bottom. There's not a lot of support around the foot. So proper footwear.
What about the socks? What do you do? Is there different things they do for with socks to be able to get them on? And
So they make a little device called a sock aid. I think I've put mine in my bag. That's more helpful for if you can't reach down to your feet, because it's a curved piece of plastic or a terry cloth with like a cardboard backing, and you have to pull the sock over the aid. It's got long ropes on it, and you lower it down to your foot to put it in. So
well,
depending, if you have back arthritis, yeah, but if your hands are limited, then it can be a challenge to get that sock on the sock aid. If you wear compression socks, Ted hose, anything like that, those are designed to be snug fitting, and they can be more difficult to put them on. Um, I learned this years ago, probably from a nursing assistant. If you're putting those on somebody, if you put gloves on, it's easier to help pull those Ted hose, those compression socks onto somebody's leg. I guess it could be helpful if you're putting them on yourself as well. We used to use baby powder. Now find some other kind of powder that's not talc based that can be carcinogenic to our lungs, but to make it smoother to put on. Um, we talked about buttons before. They make something called a button hook, and so it's a hook that's narrow and then it widens, and it's got a big fat handle, and you literally put it through the hole and wrap it around the button and pull it through. So maybe if one hand is more limited, there's lots of different adaptive devices out there that can be used to help, the type of clothing you're getting and different equipment. Again, are your hands limited? Because some of these things can be a challenge if you have significant arthritis or other limitations with the use of your hands. And this is where an occupational therapist can be especially helpful to you. People don't realize that occupational therapists have the same level of education and instruction in exercise, physiology and the muscles and the anatomy of things, to understand the workings of the body as well as these strategies and tools. And physical therapists, kind of cross the line there as well, and knowing some different tools, especially if they're specialized in a particular area. Um, but you talked about breathing earlier when you get up, and one thing, progressive relaxation. And I This is something really good to use, and I've got some anxious patients right now that this could be helpful for. So that's where you tense up one part of your body, and it generally can be helpful to work, from the top down. You tense up the muscles of your face, you hold it for a couple seconds, and then you relax it. Then you go to your shoulders and you tighten up your shoulders, stiffen them up. You feel how achy it is, and then you let that tension ease out of your shoulders. And then you tighten up your whole arms. You can even squeeze your fists, bend your elbows, tense up those arms, and take a breath and relax. It's like you're floating back in the water, relaxing or softly falling onto a cushy bed. And then you can tighten up your stomach and tense up all those muscles, tense up the bladder muscles. Like, I got to go to the bathroom. I got to hold it. And take a breath and relax and ease that tension out. Go to the bathroom before you do this so you don't have leaks. Tensing your bottom up while you're sitting. So you're squeezing your butt cheeks together. To tighten up those hip muscles is also a good strengthening exercise. And you're tensing, you're tightening, and then breathe out. You move down to your legs. You can focus on your thighs first, or just tightening up your legs all together, holding that tension, and then breathing out, letting it go. And then just going into large groups here, just down to your feet and your toes. Pull your toes in, draw them together, tense your feet up real tightly, like you're squeezing into shoes that are too small. Take a deep breath and let go. And I've got one more tip for you today, unless you have other questions, Don. We've
No.
kind of done a general glance over at arthritis. I get a lot of questions about this when people come to me and understanding of it. One tip is do not use 10W40 on your joints. I had someone years ago who told me he did that on his knee. I thought it was going to help the joint move more smoothly. No, you're going to burn your skin.
And don't drink it either, in a
Oh,
way.
goodness. I wouldn't have even said that. Um, so tendon gliding exercises. I've kind of new to learning about this, and I've started doing them myself, and I've felt a difference in my hands. So whether you're dealing, with carpal tunnel syndrome, I don't know if you've seen people done with what's called a trigger finger. So they one finger gets stuck, and they have to literally pop it up to. So what's happening there is there's adhesions. The tendons are not gliding smoothly. So I'm going to teach you these tendon gliding exercises. So if you're listening to this, it can be helpful to pop over to video. I'll try to describe it the best of my ability for those who are listening. But you're going to take your hands and make them straight. Your fingers are straight, your thumbs are tight against, and your fingers are close together.
And facing away from you, the palms are facing away from you.
Yeah, we'll just keep it simple. The palms are facing away for you. Now you're going to make what's called a hook fist. So you're going to keep what we call our knuckles, our metacarpal phalange joint, right here straight, and you're going to just bend the end joints. You have basically 3 joints through your fingers. And so if you want to keep your hands straight, and then the tips are bent. Okay, from this position, you're going to then move into what's called a tabletop. So here it's the opposite. You're keeping your finger joints straight and you're bending at your knuckle there, the MCP joint. So it's kind of trying to make a tabletop.
And they're facing each other.
Well, whatever's easiest. I'm not as worried about how they're facing. And then you're going to fold your fingers down. I forget what this one's called. Into a partial fist. So you can see here, this part of my hand and wrist is bent, but the fingers are touching the pads of your palm. So they're straight there. And from there, you roll into a full fist. And when you make a fist, your thumb should wrap around your fingers. There you go. Think about punching somebody. You want to tuck that thumb in. And that's a real issue for people. It can be related to the mobility of the thumb joint, but other things can contribute to that too. And then you would gently repeat this. I've seen different instructions with this, but And so doing this over and over again,
Maybe
and it
we
can be
could put that
really
picture, the copy of that
it can be
on there
really
too.
hard to do. When I first did this, I had trouble keeping all my fingers straight to come across like this. But I've noticed when I was doing these regularly, working with um, clients, that my hands felt better. Um, so, someone who has that trigger finger, um, it's we commonly use this as a treatment, but it's a great preventative treatment too. Today's episode was not meant to diagnose or cure any problems, so be sure you speak with a doctor, you know, get therapy services, talk to a professional, if you have other underlying conditions. This is why when I evaluate someone as an occupational therapist, I find out what medications people are on, what other medical conditions they have, what precautions are involved. And so it's important to know those things before just jumping in. But for the average person out there, these simple exercises can be helpful, and the tips we talked about really can be helpful to anyone trying to protect their joints, because stress and wear and tear over time does affect them. And things like bad posture, like how do we typically sit in a chair or slumped? I've got this wonderful armchair that I love, and it's just soft and squishy, and I fall asleep in it. And no, that's not good for any joints in my body. um, I play some games on my tablet or my phone, and there's all these exercise things now. Get this app for this exercise, and they go through different exercises. And I cringe when I see some of these exercises because they're not talking about the posture and how a person's sitting, and they're doing different exercises and they're slumped or their belly's down or their back's not in an upright position. And I'm like, no, no, don't do it that way. So you got to be careful out there with some information that's out there because, you know, doing things with a poor posture can affect us. One thing I didn't talk about, our core. What do you think of when I say core, Don?
It's like your this around your belly, a little bit lower. That's kind of and it's the protector of all your organs too. From
So
you know,
yeah, the muscles from our chest down to our hips, they're also our stabilizing. If you think about if you want to reach in and get something out here, if you're all weak in the middle, you're not going to be able to do those outside motions. It's the same with walking. If you have a lot of weakness in your core and then you try to pick one leg up, it's going to cause instability. It's also a protective for your joints, especially your back. And many of us have weakness there over time, whether it's the belly flab or, poor posture over time. Um, so that's something to consider too, is that, how strong is that core, that center of our body, because that affects our ability, and if you have issues with arthritis in your hands and your core is not strong, then you're exerting extra energy to use those arms. But if you can get your core stronger, then it can be less strenuous on those extremity joints to be able to use those arms. So, a little bit about arthritis today and how it affects us, and some tips and things that you can do. Again, speak with your doctor or healthcare professional. Um, look at different conditions and things that you might have that can contribute to problems. Be sure to share those with someone, especially if you're working with an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. Thank you for joining us today on a Focused Healthy Family podcast. If today's conversation was helpful to you, please take a moment and like and subscribe and share the podcast with someone you might find beneficial. If you find that stress, panic, overwhelm are becoming a part of your daily routine, consider exploring Don's EFT Discovery Series. So, EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, it can be used to deal with physical pain as well. People might find skeptical. What's he doing, tapping on his body? How was that helping him? But when people start the practice of it, when they engage in the technique, they're like, wow, look what EFT can do for me. For additional wellness tips, caregiving resources, and more episodes, visit us at focusedhealthyfamily.com or focusedhealthyfamilypodcast.com. Connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Focused Healthy Family 1, YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. And again, you can watch us and all our antics and see the exercises on YouTube where these podcasts air, as well as anywhere you listen to a podcast. New episodes of the Focused Healthy Family podcast are released every Thursday. And remember that Don is available to speak to organizations, caregiver groups, healthcare teams, and community groups about practical ways to reduce stress and build resilience in caregiving communities. For information about booking Don to speak at your location, please reach out to schedule a presentation or a workshop. And remember, how you speak to your children and your body and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.